As I have promised, let's talk about the additional attachments. The customizations I was describing earlier were fairly simple for the analysis and implementation, so let's now move on to something a little more complex. So often, you need additional attachments on your outgoing email, for example, terms and conditions as one more file in addition to the report itself. There are also situations when you would want, for example, product specification added to the sales quotation report or some documentation stored as attachment on the customer. For these scenarios, a workaround could be to open email before sending, we saw that feature earlier, then to manually add the documents you want and send the email. This is already very helpful, but you can go one big step further and automate the process. For that to work, you first need to decide where the additional attachments will be stored. You can decide to use, for example, the external storage type such as SharePoint or Azure, but I will show you another approach where the documents are stored under the FO document management system. Next, we need a way to specify where exactly on what type of records to look for the attachments. One obvious place is a legal entity because it is known in advance and it doesn't depend on the report being executed. But if you take that approach, you will quickly get an enormous number of attachments on legal entities, and it would be a horror to identify and maintain them. So it is wiser to use this option sparingly, only for the documents that really are legal entity related, for example, terms and conditions. So how would we solve the problem of report-specific content? It would make sense to use the report-specific records. And if we are talking about the sales invoice report, then the good candidates are the corresponding sales order, invoice journal, and customer. It can happen that you will have a lot of different attachments on the previously listed records, so it would make sense to have a way to further filter them based on some category, validity period, document type, document description, including wildcards, and so on. So let's see on my development environment an example of a form that allows all these kinds of configuration. I will go back into the print destination setting for sales invoice. And here is one example where you can store this kind of configuration. The first setting that I have here says, from all the documents that are on the current legal entity, global attachments, understand them as something that is globally available to every executed report, and as I was saying earlier, that would be perfect place for that would be legal entity. So from all the documents that are stored on the current legal entity, give me only the documents that are named terms and conditions and are of PDF file type. Then specify further what to do if such document isn't found. For example, if terms and conditions are so important and I don't want my invoice to go without them, then I want to cancel printing and raise the error. In some other situations, I can continue with or without warning. Then we specify the name that this attachment will have once when it is added to the email. In this example, I decided to keep its original description as it appears in the FO attachments, and then I wanted to add this suffix just to clearly identify them once when attached to the email. There are also other dynamic types of the attachments, as I previously explained. So this one in particular says, take the attachments that are on a customer on a current invoice that I'm printing, then take all the attachments where the description starts with the number of that invoice account, and use only external documents, don't care about language, and this would be the extension, the name given to the document. And also this one says, give me all attachments that are of a sales category, and so on. What is this category? As you can see here, I will go again into that example from earlier. If we go into this customer account and check the attachments on this customer, you may decide to add some additional fields where you would be able to maintain these additional filter conditions. For example, some special categories, period in which the document is active. So if you check, for example, here I have one price list which is active in current year, and this was the previous price list. So if I go back into the setup, that activity is automatically concerned. So I'm not going, in this case, if I say give me on the account table anything that that starts with the number of account. From these two price lists, only the one that matches the current activity period, so this one will be taken. And also, based on this setup, I said give me everything that is marked as the sales category. It is this document here, so that one will also be taken. So, as you can imagine, this is just one of many possible settings, but let's now print the document and see the results. Again, as earlier, mail is downloaded, and when compared to this setup, here, based on this setting here, we got these terms and conditions and they got this suffix from legal entity. Then, based on this setup here, we got the first attachment. From those two attachments that were on the customer, only the price list that is valid for the current year was taken. And finally, based on this setup here, the attachment which was marked with the sales category was added to this document. So, what would you need to require from your development team to get this kind of customization? First, you need this form for configuring where to search for the attachments, and it can be quite complex or very simple, or you can even go and use some hard coding, depends on your business needs. Optionally, you would do the extension of the document attachment form, where you would maintain these additional information which you would use to further filter the documents that you find on a certain record type. And finally, developers would need to implement the logic that fetches the attachments based on this configuration and then adds them to the prepared email message. As a conclusion, I can say that this isn't the simplest customization if you want to have all this described flexibility in the configuration, but it gives you really great possibilities for automating your processes. Let's check the agenda. We have covered the additional attachments. And let's now describe some advanced email message parameters that might be useful in some situations.